Hello, everyone. This is Deborah, and I have Antonio here, and welcome to AXSChat this week. Neil is on holiday, so won't be joining us, but we have the talented and fabulous Frances West joining us again. So welcome back, Frances.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Antonio. It's good to be among the best.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Frances, a lot's happened to you since we last featured you on AXSChat. We featured you about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and you were the Chief Accessibility Officer for IBM and really leading a lot of very important global conversations. And you're still leading global conversations, but you're now retired from IBM. So tell our listeners, where you are, where you're going, and how things have changed.
Okay, well, yes, thank you, Deborah. I've been reflecting as I was thinking about this interview. That is, it's about exactly a year ago, June 30th, I kind of moved on from IBM after 30 plus years, and it's been a incredible journey since. I knew at the time when I decided to retire from IBM that I do want to have a second life, but I didn't know where to go and what I can do, because as you know, once you've been with the company like 38 years, to be out on standing on your own could be a little challenging. But in this past year, I had a lot of chance to travel to many different places. The first thing I did actually went back home and to meet up with my my boarding school, high school friends. And from there, I spent quite a bit of time in different countries in Asia. And then I came back and actually spent some time in the Silicon Valleys because I've always had an interest in understanding the new economy, so to speak. So I was very fortunate to have a speaking opportunity in San Francisco area. So I took the time to spend time there. And then I also had a chance to speak at different conferences. And these conferences are actually not disability conferences. They are information technology conferences and also meetings such as the CIO Forum in Los Angeles, and also the World Congress of Information Technology in Brasilia, Brazil. And what I found is that this whole industry that we love dearly, the accessibility industry, is absolutely going through huge transformation. And that I think for the first time, my timing might be good. That is, I kind of exited IBM, but then and at a time where I think this industry needs more than ever, all of us who has experiences from different aspects, different perspective, large companies, small companies, to really come together, because we are at the cusp of some major changes, really, led by and influenced by technology revolution. So it's been a fascinating 12-month journey.
Antonio, I wanted to turn that mic over to you.
Okay. So Frances, so you had the opportunity to talk with people, I know, in different countries, and you were mentioned specifically you were in Asia for some time. Is there anything that you can tell us about what about accessibility in Asia? How people look at what people prioritize in relation to accessibility, and what if it's something that is being led by government or by private institutions?
I think Asia, just like all the emerging countries, they are very pragmatic. They take a very pragmatic view. They are not litigious or legal. Their legal framework, as you know, is not as mature, or in some cases, one would say as limiting as here in the United States. So therefore, both the government and private sectors think about this topic really as a pragmatic demographic situation and also economic situation they have to deal with. So what I see and what I hear from both government and also companies is that they definitely notice the changing of the aging demographics, that they want to do work, you know, they need to begin to do something about. I think I quoted one statistics that people are shocked, like, you know, by 2050, China will have over 360 million people over age of 65. That's more than the entire population of the United States. So the government, leading with China, but India, all the countries are of the same kind of a thinking, is that what are we going to do about this, right? So the accessibility become that whole kind of a broader context issues. And then the business are looking at this as an opportunity. And many cities, especially emerging countries, they spend a lot of time thinking about the urbanization, right? Because that's where the resources are. So cities are propping up, you know, and growing very, very fast. Again, a part of the urban planning, they begin to think about what they call, some people call the smart city. As you probably know, G3ICT right now has a very progressive initiative in the smart city area. And I think, and of course, in our context, we want to make the city also accessible. And it just so happened that really mapped to a lot of the government policy and also private entrepreneurs thinking in this area.
So, are you observing that, you know, in Asia, this is more in the smart cities agenda, or than any other place in the world?
I do think that, like I said, in Asia and also in Latin America too, the whole smart city thinking definitely is resulting in the focus on accessibility. So in September, I think 13th, I'll be speaking on digital inclusion in Taipei, Taiwan. It happened to be my my birthplace, so I'm very happy to be back there. And I'll be moderating a panel on digital inclusion and also citizens engagement. Now, again, this is by the World Congress of Information Technology, and that they have, you know, I think over 50 or 70 years of history putting on the information technology forums and involving the government sectors and private sectors. And this is I think, just like about 3 years ago when the topic of accessibility was introduced in the Mobile World Congress for the first time in Barcelona. Now you see WCIT actually wanting to have a topic in their 3-day conference. So to me, that is a data point or indication that the topic that we've been you know, kind of slaving away over the years, and we kept saying that we have to make this a mainstream topic, is beginning to happen.
No, that's a very interesting progress, because like myself and Deborah have noticed, sometimes when you look to speaker panels at smart cities events in London, in Europe, or even in the United States, it's very rare to see a panel dedicated to accessibility, or even having accessibility experts attending the event. So it's great to see that the topic of inclusion being part of a panel, because I think it will be strategic in the way how we design cities not only for the future, but you know, we're all getting older, so it's unavoidable. Back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Antonio. Frances, you and I have a long history together. I know that we both served on the USBLN board for many years, and you attended the International Labor Organization, the ILO USCIB event that we had in Washington, D.C., talking about these topics. I remember you and I having quite a few conversations about how technology needed to be a bigger part of the discussion, and also how we need to really not just look at it from US lens, but from a global lens. And I believe that those conversations are more relevant and, you know, more important than ever before. And I was wondering if you wanted to just comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Deborah, this is, as you know, this is actually something I spend quite a bit of time thinking about, and especially, again, now I have more time on my hands so I can reflect about it. And one of the first things when I retired, I was thinking, you know, why did I end up retiring from the job as IBM Chief Accessibility Officer? And I actually held this position, as you probably know, for over a decade. And this is the longest stretch or job within IBM I've ever had, right? And I remember about 3 or 4 years into my job, into this accessibility job, you know, people were beginning to ask, well, are you going to move on? Because that's typical the time frame you move to a different job. But then I just had the gut feeling that this is something I need to spend more time on. And I think in reflecting, it's because this is one area where you really combine the be able to combine your desire to help human, right, and articulate that through technology. It is a very, very unique combination. And I think historically, at least in the United States, the movement of accessibility really came from more of equal access, equal rights, and independent living. And then, of course, thanks to ADA, it brought it into some focus. But again, it's very much government-driven, you know, and wanting the society to be equal and accessible. And at the time, if you look at the 60s, 70s, or 80s, the technology wasn't there, wasn't ready to serve the human, right? Technology back then was used to process, you know, it's more of a productivity tool, right? Just to process massive amount of data, make it more efficient, faster, better. But it was never designed to take humans' interaction or human experience into consideration. And fast forward 30, 40 years now, we're sitting in an era where between cloud computing, Internet of Things, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, we're completely flipping the technology on its head, in that everybody now is talking about customer experience, talking about design in. We now have an opportunity, not an opportunity, I think we actually have absolutely the responsibility, given the technology is human-centric, to have accessibility be embedded in. So, and I think this is a topic that is becoming a human, I mean, it's fitting that now is a human right issue, right? It's more than a civil rights issue. I think you're going to see government and technology companies and also all the industries beginning to have a sense that this is something that they should really harness, and then that way they will better their service to the citizen and to the consumers. So I think we as an industry is in the forefront of actually leading and also shaping the thinking, because I think the awareness are beginning to emerge.
I agree. It's interesting watching the, you know, I think of the word disruption often as a negative word. You know, sometimes I think about the definition of that word, but we're actually seeing quite a bit of disruption that I think is going to help humanity all over the world. And that's obviously very important to me. And I know it's important to both of you as well. So I think it's very exciting to watch how things are unfolding, but at the same time, I understand it's causing stress as well. But I know you and I were always saying technology has got to be part of these conversations, a more powerful part of the conversations. And as Antonio was talking about earlier, we often don't see accessibility or disability inclusion experts at many of these mainstream technology conferences or smart cities or all the different things that are happening in our world. So I think we continue to have an opportunity to join those conversations.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important word, that the word disruption, right? And disruption does bring up fear, the initial reaction. And I have to say, when I stepped out of the IBM big ship, you know, a year ago, it was a disruption. And I really have to think hard and And one thing I think it brought me back to, when I first started with IBM, when I really had very little technology background. I was more of a business major. And I had to kind of force myself to look into the future and say, this is a company I want to be with, and therefore I have to take a jump, and try to learn as fast as I can and make myself open to what IBM as a company wants from me, and begin to shape my thinking and my contribution accordingly. And I think there's a lot of analogy or similarity here. I think all of us who are in this accessibility business, especially for those of us who spend our life and decade in there, we actually have to become very open to this disruption. And because the disruption, for example, is now, we came from what I call a linear kind of disruption in the accessibility world, right? It's relatively organized. I mean, we knew with the emergence of web, right? The web kind of slowly for the past 20 years come to fruition. So we spent a lot of time standardizing the web technology and coming up with a sister technology, harmonizing the web standards and all that. And then it was mobile. Again, in the mid 2000s, mobile became to come into play, and then we start focusing that. And it was very linear, but now we're like, we're in a world where everything is hitting at us at the same time, right? VR, AI, IoT, cloud, you name it. So I think as accessibility professionals, we have to step back and take a deep breath, and really think about, while we're doing our day job, whatever our day job is, web accessibility experts in designing or developing technology, using today's technology, because that's what matters, right? People want to have access to that. But we also have to keep a certain percentage of our time to think and to engage the future, either the future technology or the future emerging leaders, right? Or emerging companies or emerging thoughts. And I think that is actually going to be a demand on all of us as a professional, is that we have to be able to lift up our head and look beyond what we're doing today in order to make ourselves relevant and also be able to represent this wonderful industry going forward.
We often see an opening of technology hubs focus on fintech, focus on sometimes in blockchain or in IoT or Internet of Things, where spaces where you are able to go there and develop solutions following the best practices, even to develop your teams in that space. But in the area of accessibility, there's not just such a space where people can go and try to take advantage of the existing technologies. How can they apply them to accessibility? So, Francis, how do you think is the accessibility experts can collaborate with industry or with startups in order to be more effective, and even sometimes to identify technologies or objects in technology that were not necessarily developed for accessibility, but they end up being used in accessibility by accident, like Alexa from Amazon?
Well, I think I don't think Alexa will ever be a accident. I don't think nothing coming out of Amazon is accident. But they do have a lot of opportunity to, I think, to do some skunk work, and perhaps that's a result of one of the pieces. I actually been thinking a lot about this, and I really think that we have to go back to where things are. I think we can assume, especially now, the new generation of technologists, I think they actually have a much better innate understanding of why technology needs to be accessible for all. They may not use the word accessibility per se, but I think they actually have a better kind of social conscience, than, say, our generation. So I think on that front, it's actually very encouraging. So therefore, I do think that I'm beginning to try to spend a little bit more time, for example, with universities, and then also go to these, every city now has these incubation kind of meetup, right? And number one, I do have a little bit more time, but even toward the end of my IBM kind of tenure, my team, we were beginning to engage, for example, with Rice University, you know, and go back to MIT and try to do that. I mean, you don't have to go to these name brand schools, but I think even at the community college level, at the any kind of area where there is a technologist, young technology that's converging, I think that's where we have to make ourselves either both visible and present and available. And then again, so through social media, right? I mean, you guys have an incredible platform. I think a lot of the messaging needs to be, you know, somehow connected with the next gen technology that are still in school, because that's where I think a lot of their new ideas are being formulated. So I think perhaps one of the things we need to do more collectively is to have a focus on, you know, reaching out to the technology that's actually, that are just forming, so that they really can think and embed the thinking of accessibility, or when I say accessibility, meaning technology for all kind of thinking, in the embryonic state of their mind, versus, you know, later on trying to adapt or to adjust, because we all know that there's just not enough time. Everything is moving too fast.
Sorry, I was taking my mute off. Speaking of younger technologists that can move faster than me, but I think it's such a great point, Frances, because I remember training a large corporation, a very, very large corporation in the United States, and they wanted me to train their senior managers, their designers, their programmers, their content providers, all the different ones, including their quality assurance and their testers. And so we pulled together different trainings and stuff, and I started to do the training. And what I realized very quickly is a lot people, not just the younger people, but a lot of the technologists in the room, they already knew, in some cases, more than I did about this topic. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I remember talking to a few of them on break and saying, okay, so you know that if you don't do these things, that people with disabilities can't get access to your website or your apps. And this also impacts, your older customers and customers where English isn't their first language in the United States. And they said, yeah, we know that. And I said, okay, well, then how come you haven't just been, being proactive? I'm being naive here. Why wouldn't you just be proactive and blend it in? And they said, we're a major multi-billion-dollar corporation, and we're not allowed to just do that. We can't just come in and say, well, I'm going to make sure that I do all these steps. I'm going to slow down the process by making sure I'm testing accessibility, doing all the different stuff, without permission from senior management. So they said, now that senior management's on board and saying, yes, this is a priority to us, it makes us easier to do our job. And then these were the people that became the leaders. And a lot of them were young, but they weren't all young. And a lot of them really cared about having social impact. So I thought that was fascinating. And I continue to see that trend. A lot of the technologists, they seem to know what they need to do, but they don't always feel comfortable being the one that champions it, because sometimes that champion is not always appreciated in a firm if they haven't realized that this is something that should be being done all through the process of the corporation.
Right. So at least I think if we compare, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, like we have to fix the entire stack, right? All the way from the senior management down to the execution, like the programmer level, like every level you have to convince them why you want to do accessibility. But now I agree with you. I see the opening at the working level. They actually have a better sense. Now, it also has challenges, of course. In the old days, for example, the programming methodologies is very structured, right? So you can provide the checklist and ask them to do this and do that, check everything. But now everything's agile. Things are moving very fast. So again, that's when I realized, even when I was in IBM, we have to kind of almost throw those kind of a checklist mentality out the door, even though it took us, 10, 15 years to perfect it, or just when we got it perfectly, right? All these agile methodologies came in, and then we have to sit back, and then that's when we realize, okay, then you got to go to the source, and in some cases, the source, of course, is a designer, right? But now I think everybody's getting the religion. I design in. I see almost every company having some kind of a inclusion practice, empathy training. But then you say, okay, wow, then maybe we have to go even further. Is at the technology creation stage, right? Because some of these new technology, some of them are really scary, right? I mean, you think about those artificial intelligence, they're really at the microchip level, right? I mean, whether it's, even a blockchain as a new concept. And then now IBM coming out with these kind of a quantum, chips, right? I mean, the chips that almost that can think on their own. It's just amazing. So again, then it comes back to, this is a human topic. The more we can do to get the human to understand, to embrace, then the better chance we have for the sustainability of this topic. And what better way, again, is then to do it at scale is through things like the social media, outreach that you are doing. And then in terms of scalability, going back to this, I mean, I really believe that we have to kind of we have to engage the startup, just because that's a new thinking, new economy will be coming up. But in terms of scalability, you still need corporation, because that's the corporation that can really do the fast mass customization. That's why we need to have, two-pronged strategy of engaging the startup, but then also really make sure that companies, that's why, for example, the USBLN or the ILO organization definitely have their role is to remind the company as they scale that this is a topic that cannot be lost in the shuffle.
I agree. And with the ILO USCIB event we had in Washington, D.C., where we were talking about how important it is to have global business-to-business conversations. I know you and I were having some sidebar conversations during the event. Once again, you still have to have the national conversations. It is critical to have the national conversations and the state and local conversations. But at the same time, we also need to be having the global conversations, because depending upon the conversation, we have to tweak it and change it, just because this still is emerging. And once again, as we noted earlier, we have a major disruption happening. Some of it's exciting, but disruption causes stress as well. I know when Level Access, formerly called SSB Bart Group, they just got a $40 million cash infusion in their company. And so seeing money like that coming into our industry is very exciting. And I know I talked to at least 8 different investor groups between December and January that were very interested in this marketplace. And I know, Frances, you've had a lot of talks with investors as well. Not to mention, there was an investor giving out cards at the M-Enabling event that we went to, which was a very powerful event. So it's wonderful and exciting, but it's also stressful. I guess that's why it's called disruption. But exciting times, but we definitely can't have minds like yours step completely out of the industry. We understand you're retiring after 38 years. You get to retire at some point, but we're glad that you are still actively in this conversation, because it's going to take all of us to change these conversations. And I agree with you, the social media and stuff, powerful change. It's really got to be part of the conversation. And that's why Antonio and Neil both add a lot of value, but especially Antonio, because Antonio, most brilliant minds in social media anywhere in the world. And I know he's very shy and everything, but I don't see corporations understanding social media really in the way that he does. And it's just exciting to watch those disruptions happening. And my last comment, these corporations, no matter where you are, US, global, Chinese, doesn't matter, you have to humanize your brand because everyone is expecting that now. So I wanted to give Frances, you and Antonio, Beth, a chance to respond to those comments.
Well, thank you. I think we have a phrasing when I was in IBM is, you think globally, but you act locally, right? Because you kind of have to have that kind of a different perspective. And in this area, again, we're going back to this is accessibility is about human experience, human participation of technology. And because we're different race and different gender, and we do have different experience and different requirements, different preferences, and different priorities. So it's so important to have that kind of a nuanced understanding, and then technology really can enable that in this day and age with care, right? So what we don't want to happen is like I always jokingly said to my husband, like, you see a lot of startup companies using AI to create caring robots. And I'm like, do you really want a man to create a caring robots? I don't think so. Ideally, you want a woman, right? I mean, I know I'm being a little stereotypical here, but that just illustrates the point, right? So we need the diversity of people's thinking. And then you're right, Antonio's, I actually read his tweets probably more than anybody else's tweets, because it's sometimes a little dense, I have to say. I have to really think through it. But I really, coming back, I'm going to just close out by saying, maybe this is my IBM training still coming out. We really have to do a lot of thinking. IBM's the motto has been think, right? This is a time, it's more than just do, more than just execute. I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm so happy that capital is coming in, by the millions, not by 100Ks, and I want every, accessibility industry companies to be very successful, and I hope more money comes in. But then for the leaders like yourself, we really have to also do a lot of thinking. This is a very interesting time. Anyway, back to probably the ultimate thinker, Antonio.
I think the area that we work is one of those that, considering that we're talking about inclusion and affects people from from many different spectrums, it's one of theirs that needs more diversity in terms of voices than any other. And we are here talking, the three of us. A few weeks ago, we were talking with Rosemary Muchacho that works directly with Deborah, and Rosemary is actually the type of people that we need to listen the most, and sometimes because they are not as able in terms of communicating like we are here today. It's important that we make the effort to reach them and bring them to these conversations. Otherwise, it will be really difficult to create something impactful in the society that we live in.
I couldn't agree more. One other things that I'm doing post IBM is that I really try to, if it makes sense, if they want to, is to help to kind of a mentor people with disability owned businesses, right? And because they need to be not just in the conversation, in many cases provide use cases for the future. So absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with you too. And Frances, it's exciting for us to have you back on the program, because I think you're right. We do have to, and I've been doing a lot of that myself. Sometimes we're so busy that it's like you almost have to build in what one of our former guests was saying, Nancy Doyle, fire breaks. Almost like you've got to schedule them in your calendar, because otherwise it gets so overwhelmed. And I think that we all do have a responsibility to make sure, as Antonio said, that people like Rosemary's voices are included, but all of our different voices are included, and that we're mentoring and supporting each other. And that's why we created AXSChat. So it's exciting to see AXSChat thriving, and it's, you know, I think that we're heading in the right direction, but we do need to take the time to think. I also love the comment you made about IBM says globally, but remember you're a part of the local, you know, community. So I think I'm seeing more of that with some of the political things happening in the United States. They're sometimes distracting and disturbing, but at the same time, I see local young people and community leaders and people of all age really stepping up and saying, well, maybe our government can't solve that, but I can help solve this. And so personal leadership coming out and from everywhere, all over the world and from all ages. So I think I'm very excited about that as well. But Frances, thank you for joining us. We look forward to putting out information about how our guests can reach out to you on the website, and we're looking forward to the chat tomorrow. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for your leadership.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
Antonio.
you so much. Great to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.